Welcome back, YouTube family. Today I wanted to tell two stories. One of them occurred just 2 nights ago. It's not a shamanic story, but it is something very crazy that happened to me and my boyfriend, and I wanted to share it with you guys. And then the second story is a little bit shamanic. It's going to go back about 20 years when I was visiting some friends who live in Utah, and we decided to go visit a cemetery. So, if you're new here, my name is Tiffany, and this is my new YouTube channel called Growing Up Shaman, where I tell true stories about non ordinary reality from the perspective of a shaman. So, 2 nights ago, my boyfriend and I were leaving his son's house. He lives in a tiny little town in Texas, about half an hour from our home. And it was kind of late, I would say about 8:30 or 9. And we were leaving his neighborhood where there was light and going into the side streets that were completely pitch black. Like there was no moon a couple of nights ago. And my boyfriend was driving and he noticed something like some sort of commotion on his side, and he actually said, "What was that?" Like he looked to see what he thought might have come into the truck. Now, I'm always getting on my boyfriend's butt about rolling up the windows in the truck, but he insists on driving with the windows down. And hopefully after this incident he will not be doing that anymore, but we'll see. But anyways, I didn't even make a comment about, what he experienced because I didn't see anything, I didn't hear anything, and I definitely didn't feel anything. So, I just, kind of ignored him, and he goes, "Yeah, something there was something, but I don't know what it was." And I go, "Oh, well, whatever." And then the next thing you know, a couple of minutes later, he says he starts to feel something crawling up on his neck, and he freaks out. He just immediately grabs whatever's on his neck and then throws it out the window. And he goes, "Man, I don't know what that was, but something was crawling on my neck." And I go, "Well, I'm sure it was just a June bug." June bugs are very common here in Texas, and they love to go towards the light. So I just assumed that maybe it was just a June bug, but they're tiny little bugs that are about this big, and they have hard shells. And when they crawl, it does have this little tingling sensation. But he goes, "No, this was no June bug. This was much bigger than a June bug." And I was like, "Much bigger than a June bug? What are you talking about? We don't have things that are much bigger than a June bug, flying around at night." And he goes, "This thing felt soft and fuzzy." And I was like, "Oh no, soft and fuzzy, that's a bat." And I go, "Was it like the size of a bat? Bats are much bigger than a June bug." And he goes, "I think it was. It was much bigger than a June bug." So we were freaking out, thinking maybe he might have been bit on the neck by this bat. But we were out in the middle of the country roads. We couldn't just stop and look. So we just decided to keep traveling until we got to the next town, and we were able to stop at a convenience store where we were able to look under the lights and make sure that he didn't have any kind of scratches or bites or anything. And he did actually have one tiny little scratch on his neck, but he said that where I was touching the scratch, it wasn't anywhere near where he felt the crawling sensation. And I was like, "Well, then I'm sure you weren't bit, because I was worried because they say that when you get bit by a bat, you can't even feel it sometimes. But it has been 2 days and there's been no symptoms of any kind of bat bite or rabies. So thankfully, everything was okay. We didn't wreck when that happened. So all is well. I just wanted to share that story with you guys because in all of my 50 years, I have never had a bat fly into the vehicle while we're driving. Never. And I sure as hell haven't had one crawl up somebody's body and start crawling up their neck. Could you imagine? But, anyways, that's what happened a couple of nights ago. And now I want to tell the story about the time when I was visiting my girlfriend in Utah. So we used to live in St. George, Utah. She used to be a roommate of mine, but I had moved back to Texas and I was just going back to visit. and she had moved to another little town on the outskirts of St. George. I can't remember what it's called, but she lived in a really awesome cabin that was nearby a cemetery. Now, this cemetery was rumored to be haunted. And I once I heard that, I was like, "Oh, we have got to go. Can we go, please?" And they were like, if it was anybody else, I would say no, but since it's you, all right, let's go." So me and my girlfriends and their other halves and my other half at the time, we all decide to drive down to the cemetery. And one of my girlfriends and her man, they didn't even want to walk into the cemetery. They were so scared. They were like, "No, we're just going to stay at the car. We're going to leave the lights on of the vehicle so that you guys can, be lit up while y'all are in there because there's no lights in the cemetery." They had this big, huge iron gate that you had to open up to get into it. And it was an old cemetery, and we were just walking through it and stuff. And I was like, "Let's take some pictures. Let's see if we can capture anything." And this story happened way before I even knew I was shamanic. So I had been having plenty of experiences since I was 5, but I really still did not understand them. So I was still in the experimental phase, I should say, of my shamanic life. And so we start, walking through the cemetery, and I'm taking pictures. And what was cool about these pictures was that sometimes there were lots of orbs in the pictures. And then I'd turn around and take another picture, and there would be no orbs. So I was confused. I was like, "Well, what's up with this? Are there orbs in the cemetery or are there not?" I was not sure if I was kicking up dust and maybe the flash from the camera was causing orbs, or if they were for real. So I told my friends, I was like, "Look, I'm going to do a little experiment. I'm going to walk down this pathway for a good distance. And then what I'm going to do is call in the spirits. And when I call in the spirits, I'm actually going to lift my arms like this." And, and so I told them, "When I lift my arms like that, I want you to take the picture from where they were standing, a far distance from me." So that way there was no like dust particles that were potentially interfering in the photo. So that's what I did. I just started walking, I don't know, 30, 40 feet or so away from my friends. And then I decided now's the time. So I start calling in the spirits and I start lifting up my arms. And then once I get to about right here, they take the picture. And you're not going to believe what was on this picture. There were so many orbs that showed up in this photo. There must have been at least 1,000 of them. 1,000 orbs. And they were layered of orbs. It wasn't just the front, the nearest portion of the photo had orbs in it. No, layers and layers and layers of orbs. And the biggest orb was right between my hands, right, right here, right there, right above my head was the biggest orb I've ever seen in my entire life. It was so huge that it literally was mistaken for the moon. And I told people there was no moon that night, but it sure looks like there was a moon right above my head. And that one orb that was above my head was much more condensed than any of the other orbs. All the other orbs, you could tell that they were a little bit like see through, but the one that was above me, no, it was as solid as the moon. And I was just amazed. I was absolutely amazed. And it just made me wonder, hey, am I really calling in the spirits? Are they really answering when I call them? And I wish to God I could provide that photo for you guys, but the phone that I owned at the time has since been stolen, and so I no longer have the photos, and I did not have them on iCloud or anything at the time. And I do remember posting it on my Facebook, but my Facebook has not been active in many, many years. So I did try to pull that picture up out of my Facebook, but it was so long ago. I want to say, almost 20 years ago that this picture was posted that I couldn't get that far deep into the photos of Facebook. It would only let me go, I want to say 12 years back or something. And so I wasn't able to provide that photo, but I wish I could show it to you guys because it was the most amazing orb photo I've ever seen in my entire life of anybody's. And yeah, and I really don't think that it was dust that was interfering in the photo because of, the distance that I had walked before we took the photo. And the fact that the orbs were just layered like throughout the whole cemetery. It was like all the orbs just came up. It was amazing. But anyways, alas, I do not have the photo. I wish I did. But I just wanted to share that story. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, don't forget to give the video a like and subscribe if you haven't already. And I will see you on the next video. Thanks for watching.